Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Sidekick TV. Today I'm joined by James Gallagher from Payroll Intelligence, and we're doing a quick update on the changes to the Holidays Act. So there's been a lot of press and a lot of noise out there at the moment, and somewhat fear-mongering, I would say, around what could be going on with these potential changes. And so what we wanted to do, especially for our self-employed clients and our small business owners, we just want to kind of give you an update on where we're at and potentially how these changes, should they come through, are going to affect you. So James, welcome. Great to have you on again. Firstly, can you give us a quick update on where are we up to with this proposal?
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, good to be here. Where are we up to on the proposal? Well, it's effectively at bill stage. I'm not a solicitor. We obviously look after the nuts and bolts of the legislation, but what it's going to probably do is move through various stages and get enacted into law. So we're essentially at a stage where there's a very firm proposal here, and if it does get enacted into law, then we're probably looking at a 2-year window until it actually hits the ground running and becomes the truth. And the Holidays Act, as we know it, will be repealed.
Yeah, great. Okay. And so, I mean, the Holidays Act itself is quite a challenging thing to adhere to. Like we've spoken about it, I think, before, that a lot of people with the best intentions have got it wrong. So these changes, what is potentially changing? And I mean, I don't know if you'd cast an opinion on that.
Sure thing. Yes, the incumbent legislation, the Holidays Act, which we've had for a couple of decades now, has its detractors, and rightfully so. There's some complication buried in there. Look, a lot of businesses have probably gotten their head around it by now, which happens with 20 years of looking at the same stack of paper, but a lot of businesses would genuinely still be struggling with it. So it was an election promise. It's been an election promise for a few elections now, but they've gotten closer than they've ever gotten before. So big takeaway is, yes, simpler. There's going to be winners and losers out of it. Cost of compliance might start to be framed as cost of simplicity, but we'll find out about that as it matures and we get the thing up and running. So yeah, there's a handful of sort of headline grabbing changes, some significant, some bit more of just a supporting cast, ironing out the wrinkles. Yeah,
cool. So you've said, haven't you, that there'll be a few small changes, right? What's that going to look like?
So small changes. There's a subtle tweak to how parental leave, holiday relationship kind of works. Everyone has that kind of expression, even with the current legislation. I'm putting it down as a small change. A lot of people are suddenly experts in it now that's been ticked off. Let's not hold it up as a trophy. It was probably due for change. What they're discussing makes common sense. We'll move on. It'll become important for those who are affected by it.
Okay.
By the sounds of it, mandatory payslips, which, if you can believe it or not, has not actually been the case up until now. So if you didn't send a receipt of transaction to your staff, you weren't technically breaking the law, which, as you can imagine, puts some employees, and we think marginalised workforces, under the thumb a little bit, because you get what you get, don't ask questions.
Yeah.
So you can see that's another positive change.
Yeah,
and
positive,
let's be honest, most payroll systems can spit out a payslip by now.
Yeah.
If you're doing it on the back of a cigarette packet, maybe those days are over. And the one that was always a little bit tricky is probably just still somewhat tricky, but just taking a different shape, and it's cashing up balances of annual leave. It used to be 1 week per entitlement year. As we're now moving away from a weeks-based system, you'll be able to cash up 25% of your balance per entitlement year. So these are all very, very fresh. They're only 48 hours out of the oven at this stage.
Yeah, right. Okay. And I suppose if they're going to make changes down the line, it's then just realigning some of those to that. It's like the 25% rather than the 1 week or...
You've got it. It's early days. It's kind of like, if you saw a 3-year-old kid, like, are they going to go up to be a pilot, or are they going to work in finance, or are they going to be a rugby player? It's maybe a bit early to tell these things. So Let's just take a breath and be aware of where it's up to in the grand scheme of the life cycle.
Awesome. All right, cool. Now, you mentioned as well, there's medium changes. What are they kind of looking like?
Sure thing. So the workforce that most people refer to as casuals, we currently compensate them via 8% in lieu of giving them 4 weeks holiday. Now, there's also then a bit of a grey area in most people's minds about how sick leave works for those folks. We're effectively just going to make it 12.5%. The law proposes we're going to make it 12.5% annual leave, sick leave covered. That's the short version of a proposal that's not yet enacted into law. So we're still going to wait some more formal details to see exactly how that works, but that's the general rule of thumb at the moment, is we're going from 8 to 12 and a half.
And one thing we were talking about briefly yesterday was around, okay, so that's 12.5%. That's 12.5% on top of everything, applied to everything. So if you've got workers with variable working rates like overtime, call out rates, all of this, and they're casuals, it's their rate, their call out rate, plus then 12.5% over all of that applied at the end.
What we've got at the moment is it's 8% on top of gross earnings. So we would expect that same casual workforce, and forgive me for using the inducted apostrophes because it's technically not a word under the law. Everyone just uses the word casual. So I'm sure my lawyer friends watching me would be giving me a slap on the wrist if I didn't. But that's effectively what you've got. Okay. And then so for those employees that aren't casual, your part-timers or just your permanents, what have you, there is a new top-up. It's the short way of explaining this. Under the current rules, if someone worked overtime in April, they came in on a Saturday, etc., that additional earnings would feature in subsequent leave. So imagine if when they come to take leave at Christmas, the fact that they earned extra dollars months ago, sometime in the last 12 months, would bump up their annual leave rate. Yeah. So that's going to change. So the December rate will effectively be a flat rate, but that person working over their contracted hours in April will also get 12.5% on that time. So you'll see the casuals getting 12.5%, and you'll see permanent employees who work more than their contracted hours instantly get that 12.5%. Yeah, so under the current law, where it probably would have shown up in the Decembers of the world, it will immediately show up in the transaction owed to permanent staff in April, as soon as they go past those contracted hours. Yeah. It's called the LCP. They're calling it the Leave Compensation Payment.
Okay, right, great.
And the other medium change is probably the fact that we're moving from an anniversary-based system for annual leave to leave that an anniversary-based system for annual leave, a 6-month and then anniversary system for sick leave. It's all just going to start accruing from day one.
Right.
There's a little bit of devil in the detail with how that's going to work. So again, we'll wait to see what the final wash is, but that's probably the other medium-sized change. Yeah. Is that leave balance starts ticking up from day one, as opposed to this horrible system we've had where technically the leave balance doesn't go up until you've done, let's just say 6 months for sick leave or 12 months for annual leave. I often described it as going around the Monopoly board. Yeah. And that horrible thing where payroll systems show an accrual that's not legally the employees, and they get caught up between accrual versus entitlement. Employers get tangled with entitlement in advance. It's going to be cleaner.
Yeah, cool. Which is great, because I mean the other thing is with this is, what have we got, 300,000 small business owners out there like doing their best to get things right, and this thing you feel like you need a quantum science, quantum mathematics degree to get it right, you know?
You do. Yeah.
It's tough. So in my mind, if simplification and in a lot of cases, employee benefit, I think that's what most small businesses want.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I don't think there's massive... There's probably one group that stands to lose a little bit, but I don't think there's massive financial consequences for employees in a lot of what's been proposed. Yeah. Remember, this is 48 hours old. We can already see the volleys from those outside of government in terms of what's coming. Totally. And that probably segues into one of the larger changes that is being proposed. So there's a bit of water to go under the bridge here.
Okay, cool. Now, what about big changes? What do you see that is actually going to be pretty significant, or that you've or in pockets, like what are you going to see?
So one of the big changes that's coming through, there's probably two. So since we've kind of segued in from the sick leave, we'll talk about that first. At the moment, the current legislation says 10 days. And whether you work Monday to Friday, which would make 10 days about a fortnight, or if you just worked, let's say, Mondays, you get the same 10 days. Now, the argument, sensible as it is, the argument is, why should a person who only works 1 day a week get 10 days of sick leave? Isn't that a bit disproportionately large for their roster than someone who's only maybe going to take a fortnight? And so what has been proposed, and leave from day one, is going to prorata. It's going to prorata just at a slightly different rate than annual leave. Annual leave, you'll end up with roughly the same 4 weeks. Sick leave, you'll end up with roughly the same 2 weeks. And 99% of the time, that makes a whole lot of sense. But of course, the counter argument from different vantage points, we breathe in everyone's opinions, is that part-timers shouldn't be unfairly penalised. Why should you have less entitlement to sick leave just because you work fewer days. It's a little bit of a beat up from both sides, so you sort of just sit back and watch them throw mud.
The other argument is, why should people that work part-time get more benefit than
Correct.
others?
If you get into the weeds, you can eventually find a couple of cases where you could see an argument, but it's not the whole case of, if you work Mondays, you should be entitled to 10 days. Because if you work Mondays, you've got at least a few public holidays in there as well.
Yeah.
The strange part is that if this was such like a sub-economy, there'd be people doing this already. In fact, I've laughed, I think, with colleagues of yours and said, well, if it was that easy, I'd go and get 5 one-day-a-week jobs and have a fair swag of time. And considering that we Mondayize some public holidays, I'd probably sign up for some Saturdays and Sundays as well. Those poor employers would never see me. So we're laughing about an issue that is obviously quite serious, but that's one of the major changes. So
totally.
People will have their feelings on that, and you can probably see some common sense among it, but there's still a few arrows being fired from each side because it can be interpreted as a bit of an attack on worker entitlements. Fair play can't argue with the headline,
because you are taking something away that exists.
Correct.
But the counter argument is, should it exist?
That's the counter argument. Should it exist? It's a big 3-word argument. The other major change, and this is the big one. This has been what's upsetting people a lot about the Holidays Act for 20 odd years, is there is a group of very complex calculations that value someone's time off. It's a dynamic minimum wage set for each individual based on their past earnings, where they're up to, etc., etc., etc. They are very complicated. And the payroll tools probably get it about right, but at the end of the day, if you're navigating it in the wrong direction, the Titanic was compliant to be pointed at an iceberg, it's only going to do so well. So the challenge has always been, most people trust the numbers on the screen until they get a horrible letter saying, well, the numbers you've been sending out to people have been wrong for several years. So all that is going. All of that is going. So when it comes to time off, what is proposed is that it will be a flat rate. Those 4 big ugly rates will be replaced by a flat rate and an asterisk. There will be a certain cohort, and it's been flagged as piece rate. So I go into a job, and I think somewhere in the publications was an example of I fill buckets of apples. But we know this from any number of industries where there's a piece rate.
We went down a rabbit hole.
We did go down a rabbit hole, So for those who have a piece rate, there'll be a calculation to allow for their missed opportunity to earn. But for those who typically have a complex calculations because of just straight up commissions or incentives, all those days are gone. So, all those days are proposed as going. So the simplicity of valuing leave is what's coming in.
Yeah, perfect. And this is where we, should this come in and should this become law, and then what we might find is that people start to do some work around what their incentive models look like. Because whether you incentivize somebody on piece rate or commission or what have you, then that might be treated really differently under this proposal. So, so that's where, again, that's probably in time. It's engage with the professionals like you for sure, engage with the professionals like Sidekick, ahead of time thinking, what does the future look like? And then what do you think we need to do around modelling the kind of cost of this change for businesses? Do we think there's going to be much, or do we roll with the punches?
Rolling with the punches hasn't aged well for those who have sought to do it. And we look to, we're sort of saying that with a smile, but we look to the biggest, most well-resourced, smartest, most experienced, most well-paid employers in the country, and they got it wrong. So there's no set and forget. And let's be very serious that there probably won't be a set and forget in these new rules that are not yet iced. But you might also be carrying, let's just say, a financial disease state into a new set of rules. So whilst we say, there's going to be a 2-year period, that might seem like a long time. I think Brooke Van Velden quoted in the live stream, she said the Ministry of Education might have already signalled they expect this to take a decade to implement. Again, a couple of degrees of Chinese whispers there, but I'm pretty sure that's what she said. So 2 years to most people probably seem like a long time. It's like, no, you're going to want to check your current position, see if you meet some kind of a risk threshold, because if you do, you're probably going to want to take a deeper dive. You just won't be able to go into a new rule set on the back foot. So people might just assume, so-and-so is going to issue a press release, our tool will be compliant from day one. They haven't been compliant for 20 years, most of them.
Yeah.
Let's be proactive about our businesses and taking ownership of a liability that could be there. Now's a good time to extinguish it and make sure that you hit what should be smoother waters. Absolute great shape.
Cool. Yeah. So get a bit of an audit on it, take a look, see what your risks are, and again, the smaller and simpler your business, fewer staff, simple ways of remuneration, probably nearly no risk, right?
Yep.
Bigger businesses, commissions, overtimes, different working rates, what potential payroll system you're on, they're all kind of risk factors, hey? So,
I think the main thing will be that a lot of businesses should be taking independent advice. Speak to your advisors around the country, because whilst I'm sure very few people would claim to be Holidays Act and legislative change specialists, those independents who are around the country, your Sidekick nationwide team, are going to be able to look at this and say, well, you meet a particular risk threshold, and here's the 2 or 3 things that you probably need to know, but life under the old Act is probably not going to be that different to life under the new Act.
Yeah.
But equally, if there might be a few that come up and say, oh, we're trying to do this, and we can see risk, well, they can already present, they say, well, if our employees who we want to incentivize, because we value employees who come in at low base and are prepared to contribute to the business and put some skin in the game. We love them. We don't want them to be financially worse off just because they went to a funeral or because they're in hospital. How do we model this now under new laws with base, with comms, etc.? Or maybe there'll be some in-house policy where they say, we get what the law is, but we want to preserve the de-risking that the 03 rules had. So there might be something a little bit bespoke. So speak to the advisors around the country. My advice would be, don't try and just wing this on your own. Speak to someone, and then if it's trickier or goes beyond that level of expertise, everyone in those seats is mature enough to say, we are going to kick this up to a specialist.
Yeah, totally. And that's the way that we operate. Like, one of our main values, as you can see one here in Genius, but another one of ours is connected. And it's like, we don't know everything. So we can do the modelling, we can probably do the beginning of the risk assessment, we can do that. So essentially, we want to work with our clients on this one, and then, like you say, kick it up when it needs to be, because you're going to have employment contracts changing, you're going to have possibly payroll systems changing, you might need to be running audits, right? Who knows? And I suppose the key thing is just knowing what that path looks like ahead.
Yeah. Don't try and go it alone. This is not the time to just start thinking, I'm going to run my own payroll and cut my own hair. This is something you need to just take a step back and seek independent specialist advice. And I'd say your Sidekick team, amongst many advisors around the country, are in a great position to do so. Yeah,
perfect. Cheers, mate. Thanks,
you. Ric.
All right, thank you very much for watching this, okay? We will put James' details with this video where you've seen it. And so if you do want to reach out to us or James or get a bit of a run through of this one-on-one, please feel free to do so. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers.